Okay, so tonight for homework, boys and girls, we are going to annotate this nonfiction text, and we're going to use it to answer some questions online over the next couple of days. So this is actually going to be really helpful for us. All right, so we can remember that we're definitely going to go through with our annotation, and we're going to start by numbering each paragraph, okay? So if you notice, sometimes the author will indent each paragraph, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And what they do is they leave a little bit of space in between, and that tells the reader that there are different paragraphs, okay? And here we have paragraph number 5 at the bottom, but that goes into the other side. So right here is still paragraph number 5. Then there's the space, and this is paragraph number 6. Okay? So this expository piece has 6 paragraphs. All right. So our next step that we want to do is we want to find the title. Polar bear jails are filling up in the melting Arctic. And we are going to label that as our topic. So this is the topic of the whole piece. And I find it pretty interesting that they have polar bear jails. And I want to keep reading and find out what that's all about. All right, so now we want to find the introduction paragraph, which is right here, and we want to circle it because the introduction paragraph is very important, and we want to label it introduction. And lastly, let's read it. Okay, so the people of Churchill, Manitoba, a small town in the Canadian Arctic, have always lived near polar bears. Lately, though, the polar bears seem to be invading the town. The townspeople have had to chase the polar bears away by throwing firecrackers at them, banging on pots and pans, and putting them in polar bear jail if they will not leave people alone. The reason might surprise you. It's climate change. Okay, so here in my introduction, I'm getting like a little bit of a story or an anecdote about what's happening in a place up north in Canada that has to do with polar bears. So I want to read on and find out what exactly is happening that's making the polar bears act this way. All right, so my next step I want to do is I have my introduction, and I want to do a bracket around the body of the piece. So I'm going to start here at paragraph 2, and I'm going to come all the way down to paragraph 5, okay? Because the center of a nonfiction piece is always called the body. We have the introduction, and then we have the body. All right, the next step we want to do is we want to read each paragraph. We're going to underline the main idea, and then we're going to write a blurb on the outside. The blurb is what the paragraph is about. For the people and animals who live in the Arctic, the worst effect of climate change is the melting of sea ice. The melting has changed the natural routine of the polar bears and how they interact with human beings. This paragraph is a little different because a lot of times we see the topic sentence as the first sentence, but in this paragraph the topic sentence is the second sentence. And I believe that the blurb that I should put on the side is polar bear / human interaction. So go ahead and write polar bear / human interaction. Okay, paragraph 3. Polar bears typically spend the winters hunting prey such as seals on Arctic sea ice. This is the time when they get most of their food for the year. During the warmer summer months, polar bears return to land and live off the fat reserves that they build up during the winter hunting season. Okay, so in this case, the topic sentence is the first sentence. Polar bears typically spend the winters hunting prey. Okay, and so I'm going to just write winters equals hunting prey. I wrote winters equals hunting prey. That was my blurb for this paragraph. Paragraph 4. However, due to climate change, temperatures in the Arctic are increasing. This means, according to a National Geographic report, sea ice is forming later in the fall and disappearing earlier in the spring. Dr. Stephen Amstrup, the chief scientist for Polar Bears International, states that this change in the sea ice harms polar bears' ability to get enough food to survive. His organization has found that, with the current shorter hunting seasons, the population of polar bears in the western Hudson Bay area of the Canadian Arctic has decreased by 22% over the past 30 years. They also found that fewer polar bear cubs are surviving into adulthood. Those that do survive have smaller skulls and weigh less on average. So my topic sentence that I want to underline is, however, due to climate change, temperatures in the Arctic are increasing. Now, this kind of sets us up to tell us all of the effects of climate change. Okay, so this whole paragraph is about the effects of climate change, but specifically on polar bears. So sorry, this is a long blurb, but I need to make sure that we know that this whole paragraph talks about what things are happening because of the climate change to the polar bears. And I noticed that all of those things are bad, negative things. So it's telling me that climate change is not actually a good thing at all for the polar bears. Here we go. The melting of Arctic ice means that polar bears are forced back onto land for more of the year. This is dangerous for several reasons. First, it is dangerous to the bears themselves because there is no evidence that they can eat as well on land as they do on the sea ice, according to Amstrup. Second, it is dangerous to the people living on the land where the bears are forced to go. Polar bears are coming into more contact with people while at the same time being desperate for food. This can result in polar bears attacking people, which is not typical behavior in the normal environment. In nearly 300 years, there have only been 2 fatal polar bear attacks in Churchill, but in 2013 alone, 3 people were injured by polar bear attacks. Fortunately, no one was killed. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of paragraph 5. Here it is. And I'm going to underline, the melting of the Arctic ice means that polar bears are forced back onto land for more of the year. Okay? And I see in the next sentence it says, this is dangerous for several reasons. So this whole paragraph, I felt like talked about dangers of melting ice, which is caused by climate change. Okay? So this is dangers of melting ice. Paragraph 4 is the effects of climate change, and paragraph 5 is also the effects of climate change. So I'm seeing that this whole article is talking about the negative things that are happening to polar bears and humans because of climate change. All right, and then last but not least, I see number 6 is my final paragraph. And I remember that the final paragraph is called the conclusion. So I'm going to put a box around it. I'm going to put a box around it, and I want to label it conclusion so it stands out to me as a conclusion. And I know that the author wrapped things up and kind of repeated the main idea. So let's take a look. Michael Spence, the mayor of Churchill, says that more interactions between polar bears and people are likely, so they're trying to learn to be safe. Children in towns are taught how to act if they see a polar bear. Manitoba Conservation, the local park ranger group, watches over the area 24 hours a day during the height of bear season. But the only way to truly solve the problem is to stop and reverse the effects of climate change. And that is a much bigger problem that cannot be solved by Churchill residents alone. It will take a global effort to keep everyone in the Arctic, people and polar bears alike, safe. So, going back to this whole paragraph is really about trying to learn to be safe, all about becoming more safe with this problem. Okay? And just basically that there needs to be a change in what's happening. Okay? So again, this was an expository text, which means that it was informing us as the reader about what's happening to polar bears and to humans because of climate change. So, thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.